Previously on Live with Bria.
Soda? Thank you.
Calm down now or we open fire! No! Tutti Frutti!
The wild man of Borneo. See you around.
Destroy her! Destroy them all!
Bobby, shut up!
You cheated me, old man. Cheated me of vengeance. Cheated me of justice.
Turkey.
Come on, batface.
Come on, Wolverine. Let's go.
Eat dirt, Cyclops.
Hey, tough guy.
Oh no!
Come on, they're gonna kill him.
Good.
What?
And now, the conclusion.
It's a ninja legend. When a long sword is on top of a short sword and covered with a red cloth, it means a challenge. No one can turn down the challenge. You're going to accept the challenge? You are a ninja, aren't you?
Hello!
It's a ninja legend.
What, really? You're gonna mess up my first show of the year? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so I'm Sabrina, and also known as Bria, and this is the first episode of my second season. Yeah, those are seasons now, I guess, of my radio show, Live with Bria. I'm kind of a little tiny bit on vacation. I'm here on vacation with the darling Sophie Labelle, who's taken a bit of a break from her usual rigorous schedule of comics and has very kindly sat down with me today to talk about, I don't know, art and stuff. But I mean, us artists never get real vacations. We're just, we're always working. We don't ever get a chance to actually take any breaks. Although right now it seems like we mostly stay up all night drawing and yelling at the TV.
You did that.
Yeah, that's come on. I'm gonna get you doing that one day.
Well, I accepted to be on your show because you said there would be alcohol and we would get wasted live, but that didn't happen.
We drank it all. I'm sorry, hun. It's a little. We follow a really tight ship here. A very rigorous schedule of drinking and hot tubs.
Oversleeping?
Yeah. Well, only oversleeping. We would stay up till 5 a.m. working.
Okay.
Very serious artists. And it's okay for us to get up at 1 in the afternoon right before we're supposed to do a radio show. It's been great, and I really feel quite privileged that I even just get to hang out with you. It's been.
Oh, look at you.
What? I don't know. One thing I felt like has been a big thing to me over the past 6 months is just, as part of this show, talking with people, getting to know all these other artists, and feeling like I'm actually connected to the trans community, because I don't think I really had a sense of any kind of community before in my life, to be honest. And I feel really privileged that I get to meet people like you, Sophie.
Yeah, I actually felt the same way the first times that I got to meet other trans artists, but also any other queer cartoonists. It really feels like a tight community, and there's this thing where you connect with other trans people to a certain level because you share a common experience on some levels, but then when you meet other trans cartoonists, it's just this awesome thing that
it's a very
so
weird bond. Yeah. I mean, the trans community in general, you share certain experiences and you can talk with each other on a level that sadly you can't always express with cis people because they don't get it to some extent. They try, bless their hearts, so many of them try. But it's just sort of like, unless you've been through this, it's hard to actually connect like that. But then you add this extra layer of cartoons or art, and it's really great. I don't know, to meet kindred spirits like that. Would you say that's the main benefit you found of, like, I don't know, like we talk about like being trans, whether it's like to be celebrated or the good sides that come with it. And I feel like that is the main good side, is I've met a lot of really great people.
Yeah, no, definitely. People ask me uh, like, what is good in being trans? Like, why do you think we should be proud or anything? And since I came out as a teenager, I found so much community and family in other trans people, and they basically, I family that I wouldn't necessarily have if I wasn't trans.
Yeah, I mean, it is a double-edged sword though, in the sense, like, I think of all, like, I use this analogy to death, but going through cancer, I met some really wonderful people and had great experiences, but it was still this really hard thing that for the most part was painful, and it's a really hard set of emotions to wrap your head around, to be honest. And like, it would be insulting for somebody to say you should be ashamed of, say, what, having cancer or having gone through a trial of any sort. There's
Mm-hmm.
no shame in that, but it's still painful, and it's a very complex set of emotions.
Yeah.
And you can explore it through art, I suppose.
Yeah.
So normally I ask guests like what their favorite dinosaur is and crap,
Oh
but
man, you asked me
we already
like
did that.
twice.
Yeah. So what the hell am I even supposed to talk to you about now? Like,
Well, I prefer dinosaurs with clothes.
yeah, that's been my shtick lately. I love drawing dinosaurs with clothes.
Yeah, they're my favorite. So any kind of dinosaur, as long as they're wearing clothes, it's okay.
As long as they're sweet and cute.
Oh, they can be badass and wearing cute clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that contrast of like tough and cute. I guess I don't know. It's nice to tread that line a bit, blurring the
That's
dino
interesting.
gender. So I don't know. We're hanging out in BC here this week, working on different projects. What you've got one coming up right now, right?
Oh yeah. Okay, so I'm so excited about this. It's pretty much my first uh full length project that isn't about transness in like maybe a decade or something.
How
Yeah.
novel.
And it's just so funny how it happened because I was working on that storyline in my webcomic, um, in which my characters were celebrating the solstice, the winter solstice, and they were exchanging gifts. And the main storyline was that my main character Steffi was getting a doll from her boyfriend, and that wasn't really planned. And as I was drawing the strip, I just drew this other character, Ciel, who's non-binary, with a plastic a rubber chicken, just playing with it in the background without it being like the main plot. But it just became a recurring theme in like the next. I think there was 6 or 7 other strips after that, and people just got so in love with the rubber chicken, and I guess I kind of did too uh, because yeah, I just wanted to have fun drawing um, adventures with that rubber chicken, and yeah, I made it happen apparently.
That's and when do you think that one's gonna come out then?
It's got the official date is on January 30th.
30th?
Yes. So yeah, that's something I do often. I need the pressure from deadlines. When you're when you're a self-published artist or an independent artist, you have a tendency to slack a lot, and so if I made this known and official that the release date was on this day, then I'm gonna work on that book for real.
That's a good advice for kids who are starting out in art, aspiring comic artists. Give yourself a schedule, give yourself deadlines,
Oh
and put the
yeah.
pressure on yourself.
Yeah, without pressure, I know myself. I started so many art projects before. I started several webcomics before I signed mail, but they all ended up, just because I didn't have the pressure to
Mhm.
continue and just
What do you,
moved on.
what made, say, Assigned Male special in that it was the one you finally kind of kept going with and succeeded on? What was different?
Having an audience. I decided to put a lot of energy on getting people to watch me do it. So that that's what put the pressure on me to draw it. Because people were expecting me to publish on certain days. I started with a tight schedule of publishing on Tuesdays and Fridays, I think. I don't remember. That was 2 years ago,
Mm.
and then I moved on to a 3 times a week schedule, and it's this kind of schedule that I need for.
It's hard to keep up 3 times a week. It's what I've been working on for the past few months, and I'm going to have to go on a reduced schedule for a while too while I do this graphic novel I'm supposed to be writing. But was it difficult at first for you to jump and add to your schedule, or did it happen pretty naturally?
It happened pretty naturally because since my comic was drawing attention from people, um, I just kept on. I don't know. The ideas just kept pouring, and people kept feeding me stories and themes, and yeah, I still feel like there's just so many things I need to talk about related to trans issues. People ask me, when you'll run out of trans stuff to talk about. What are you gonna
There's
talk about?
always more.
Oh my god!
It's
Oh
a
my god!
whole universe of crap to deal with. That's my problem. Like, I've been wanting to reduce my schedule for a while because I know I have to be working on these other things. But there's always more stuff coming at you, and you're like, oh, I gotta make a comic about that. That's pissing me off, or that's got to be dealt with.
Oh yeah,
There's always more.
I stopped updating. I started my vacation last week, and since then, I just have so many comic ideas that are just sitting, and
Right?
it's just so hard to not draw them and just like leave it. And
This is the tragedy, I think, of being an artist is that no matter what people say, oh, I don't have any ideas. Not true. You do. Thought is inherently faster than action. And so that means no matter what, you are always going to have more ideas than you could ever possibly execute in your lifetime. And it's tragic. Like, I mourn for all the ideas that I know I'll never get to do.
oh
Entire
yeah,
stories.
oh yeah, and people ask me, you should tackle this theme that's not exactly related to gender, but it's cool anyway, or you should like do this or that, and I'm like, I don't have time for that.
Right?
And also people actually hate on me because I only talk about trans stuff, but it's the
Like,
theme of my comic.
I sometimes wonder about that. Like, I think there's a huge pressure. We talked about it briefly in the discussion back in December that Jessica was part of, about like getting burned out. I think I actually talked about with robot hugs too in my last show. The idea that like intersectionality, we're talking about all these different things coming together and how they influence, our lives and different people's experiences. But it's kind of like there's too much. I think it burns people out a little bit because they feel like they have to fight the whole world and all these problems. And I think you need to pare it down and find something that you have something good to say about. Like I can talk about trans stuff. I feel like I know something about that.
Yeah.
So we can do a trans based thing. That's the thing we're working on. Just like some doctors, they're specialists, or some people were doing AIDS research. So we have to cure all diseases. Like you can't do everything. You gotta choose something and worry about that little bit, and just trust that other people are working on the other stuff. And I don't know. It'd be nice to connect a few things. Like I'd love to do a collaboration with somebody who actually knows something about racism, like being very white in a very white place. I highly doubt I know a whole lot about racism, but I would love to talk about it with someone who's qualified.
Yeah, actually, I had this collaborator in my comic early on that we're just too busy now to be able to work together anymore. But I have this intersex friend. She's an intersex activist, and she helped me with a couple of strips where she just like helped me, talk about certain issues and yeah, it's been great because I don't like it's such a catch-22 when talking about issues that don't directly affect you, where on a side, when you have visibility and you have a platform and an audience, you kind of feel like you have this responsibility to, you know, uh, talk about issues that are important, but then at the same time, you're not qualified, or
Mhm.
you're not part of the community you want to help, I guess, or
And
give visibility to.
and you'll always end up having someone, if you don't discuss it, people will criticize you for not discussing it, and if you do discuss it, people will say you're appropriating it or you have no right to talk about
Yeah,
this. Like, you just can't really win. No matter what, you're going to piss somebody off, and the best, all you can do is, I guess, try and do the right thing, try and accurately represent things, or do justice to whatever your subject
yeah,
is.
and also the fact that it's art. This makes it like really hard, because we're the activism that we're doing through our art, it's still art, and it's still our um, artist vision that we put on the screen. And yeah, and
Well, it's ultimately why we're doing it, because we were, starting out in our lives, we were artists first, right? You're just drawing things because you like drawing, and then eventually get involved with this stuff because you realize pretty quickly that art becomes a lot more meaningful when it has a purpose.
hmm
But we're still artists, and like, I sometimes just want to draw something really cool, or I just want to, do something more elaborate and interesting with the comics medium, but like, then that's kind of getting in the way of, say, whatever issue I want to talk about,
yeah,
and it really limits you sometimes.
and also the fact that I don't think I would be a full-time cartoonist right now if I wasn't talking about this specific issue. So that kind of taints my art in any way I can put it. I mean, my audience is interested in hearing about trans issues,
Mhm.
so I
There's a hunger for it. People are desperately wanting more and more of it.
yeah, but I feel I would be like kind of what's the word? I would be uh I don't remember the word. Sorry, that's the struggle of not being a native English speaker.
That's what's so impressive, though. Like, you're conversing far better than I could in French. Say, I mean, the French education out here is abysmal. I felt like I was pretty good at French, but there's no way I could actually have an interview or write an extremely popular webcomic in French. But you do
Oh,
both.
but that's not talent. That's just assimilation.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Being a non-English speaker, you are forced to learn
Yes.
English, and it ultimately, I mean, you could see it as a disadvantage, but in many ways, it's an advantage now because you speak two freaking languages, whereas English speaking people don't.
Yeah, and also it gives me a perspective that opened a lot of doors for me. My career is mostly happening in Europe right now.
Mhm.
That's where people hire me. That's where people invite me for talks and Q and A's. And I think that that's a lot to do with this proximity that I get with people that have English as a second language, which is the case of most European people. Somehow my comic is really popular in Germany and in Sweden and Switzerland and places like that. Who there's this kind of awareness of being a minority, and I see a good analogy with transness there, where you know that you're always going to be a minority and you have to make your way through life knowing that it will always be this uh, I would say handicap, but not handicap in a negative light. It's just something that you need to deal with in order to get through different.
I like viewing things as challenges. Everything we have to overcome in life, you take it as a
Well,
challenge.
well, not exactly a challenge, because other cartoonists, for example, who would have English as a first language, don't have this challenge. So it's the same goal, it's the same path, except that you have this thing that throws more obstacles on
Yeah,
your
but
way.
but overcoming that challenge, I think, probably adds to your life. It adds to your character. Have this skill
hmm
that English speaking cartoonist doesn't have. It's like, yeah, maybe in the end it's easier for them and they get to the finish line first. Who knows? But in terms of this is what journey of life or whatever, you overcame these things and that forged you into a more complete person. Does that make sense? I'm kind of martial arts background, everything's training. You know, I spend most of my life going full Vegeta and just trying to become the strongest and bestest. And everything's a challenge. Everything is a chance to become better. And even like, okay, it gets into muddy territory with something like cancer. Cancer made me way better and stronger than I ever could have been before. The thing is, not everybody makes it through cancer. So it's hard for me to be like, yeah, go through that challenge. It's great. It's like, well, it was 50-50 chance I'd make it through that. And it was basically blind luck whether or not I lived or died. And how could I be like pro cancer as like a character building exercise or something? You know, like there's challenges and then there's challenges. Like, oh, I think I was thinking about that. I don't know if I'll do a comic about it, but just when people talk about, say, being trans, is like, oh, it's an experience. It's this unique experience.
You're so brave.
But it, like, you know, there's
I
a
ad-
lot of things that are unique experiences.
I got told often, you know, people that admire us. I admire you so much for what you do. I hear that so often, like about being trans. It's
And
just,
like, I try to read everything. They're coming from the best place. They're
yeah.
just trying to be nice. But like, it just, when you're hearing this all the time, after a while, it's kind of like, you know, you don't go up to the cis girl and say that. And it just kind of others
Yeah.
us a bit. But like, people get into this idea that like, oh no, this thing that you have to go through that's very difficult, that's good in of itself, say. But like, there's lots of experiences you could have. Like, I could cut off all my skin and that would be a unique experience. You know what I mean?
What
Like,
kind of example is that?
but like, you know, like, but when people try and say, no, you should like this extremely difficult and painful thing you're going through because it's a unique experience. Like,
yeah, I hear that.
it's like, there's a lot of unique experiences that I don't want to have, and you wouldn't want to have either. So don't tell me I should like this or be completely happy about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were saying at the very beginning, it's a mixture of emotions that comes with this, and I don't know. It's
So yeah, we were talking about language.
It's one thing.
Now we're talking about like ripping your skin off.
I go to really, you know what, honestly, my heart, I want to do horror comics. That's where a lot of my start was, working with Zombie Robot Comics, doing their Ultra Terrestrial series. I want to get back to doing more really completely messed up horror comics. I know it's like the exact opposite of what you like, but
Oh yeah, you know, when I was a kid, I was mostly drawing like, you know, very shoujo like comics, and
no.
everything was about romance. And
my dream is I want to illustrate Cannibal Corpse album covers. You don't know that. If I showed you the picture, you'd probably be scared of me. I like.
I'm already scared of you.
I'm gentle, I swear. But like, I don't know. How do we even get on this topic of like? I guess, you know, being an artist. A lot of artists don't do the thing that's always their first choice. Like, we're doing trans stuff because it's important and we're getting careers and meaning out of it.
Yeah.
But what would have been your first choice as an artist?
Well, you know what? I don't know, because I've been drawing comics since I was a little kid, and
you showed me your first comic. It was really cute.
It wasn't the first; it was the
earliest you could find.
Yeah, but I always included so many, you know, gender non-conforming and queer characters as much as I could, and I remember spending so many hours at the library just going through every comic book, and every book actually that I could, just to find other, you know, other characters like me. So I feel that one of the reasons that I really got into comics was just to create more trans characters, more relatable characters for gender non-conforming and queer youth. And I feel that I wouldn't be pushing myself so hard to succeed in this field if it wasn't because of that, you know?
Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think, we talked about this in the last time we talked on air, about really the future is in just casual representation. Just like you have a story and it happens to have somebody who's, you know, not gender nonconforming or any other sort of thing that exists in the world, and it's not a big deal, and there's not all these really insulting tropes associated with it. And
but
just
the thing is that I'm simply not interested in drawing a story or, you know, working on a book that doesn't have trans character in it, or where transness isn't at least mentioned, you know?
Especially since there's still so much to sort out with this. Like, to move on with another subject would almost be to say, like, this subject is over. But it's not
Hmm.
over, and it's not going to be over for a really long time.
And I see, the reason why I got into teaching first was that I knew that I could be, a positive model for trans and gender non-conforming youth in schools, and that really worked out well. That what I found when I started my comic was that I could reach even more people by doing this,
Absolutely.
and that's the reason why I'm not teaching right now. That's because I can reach more people, and if I wasn't be doing this comic or this work, I would probably still be teaching.
I feel the same way. I used to work as a martial arts instructor, and just in that field in particular, it was such a masculine field, and little girls would be so happy to come in and see a female instructor. I would, no one there really knew I was trans, and there was one trans boy who was there who absolutely loved me, but for the most part, I didn't talk about it, and it wasn't anyone's business. But just having a female
Oh yeah.
instructor in this masculine field, it made girls going into it feel so much less self-conscious about it.
And one of the school I was working in had like 3 trans kids, and they were the only ones that knew I was trans, and that was enough. That was already pretty amazing. I
Yeah,
remember
right?
growing up and just
God.
trying to. I had one queer teacher in elementary school, but he was a cis gay man, and he was openly gay, but then he had all this internalized homophobia that he needed to sort out, and basically, was showing off his masculinity as a way to counter this the potential violence that he could face.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's carrying with them their baggage, and it becomes difficult to say be a role model or something because we're not perfect. Everybody's
Hmm.
got their flaws, and you can't hold a person up as a saint when nobody's a saint. Everybody's got their little baggage, and like, you can do harm to people. Like, I'm very careful about, I don't talk about a lot of issues that I face personally in some of my comics because I don't want to dump that toxicity out into the world. People don't need to hear about some of these things because that's my stuff, and I don't want to burden other people with it. You
I'm
know?
not sure what you mean here.
Like, there's conflicts I have internally about, just say, the trans experience and
Oh,
emotional
I see.
problems
I
I
see.
have. And like, sometimes, a lot of my early comics, they were about those sort of things, and I really helped me, and people who read them, they wrote to me and told me that it helped them as well. But there's some issues that, like, I haven't resolved them fully, and I don't really know how to resolve them, and me making a comic about it would just be me kind of bitching about it. And I just kind of feel like it wouldn't be helpful to anyone other than me. It would be like a selfish exercise to put this out there. So I just kind of, I don't know what to do about it. But basically, when you start to realize that you're a role model of some sort, or that you're in a position to be influencing people,
Hmm.
now you have to be careful about what you're putting out there. And it's tricky. How do we balance the personal and the political?
Yeah, I remember that teacher I was talking about plainly, and just like told me that I was facing a lot of bullying at that school, and he told me that if I dressed more like a boy, that wouldn't happen,
Oh
stuff
my
like that.
God. Yeah, I mean, there's like these it's like, okay, there's these practical sides to
It's mostly
things.
coming from this gay man that I looked up as, a model for like queerness, and
But he was basically telling you to keep it under the lid.
yeah, that was really hard for me.
It's like, yeah, it starts, people talk about victim blaming, and like, I'm, again, coming from like a self-defense perspective, there's times where you're like, well, if you follow these simple steps, it'd be really a lot easier to avoid assault. But people are like, what the fuck are you saying that for? Like, you're blaming me for being assaulted or something? They're like, no, it's just crap. I just don't want you to get assaulted. But the problem with,
Hmm.
say, like the clothing policing and stuff, especially coming in your situation there, it really is him saying, don't be yourself,
Yeah.
and don't be who you are, be this model of what I think you should be. And that's a tricky thing, especially when you're dealing with someone you don't understand. Like, I'm pretty like binary trans. I like being a woman, and I try and support, say, non-binary people as best I can, but the truth is I'm not non-binary and I don't know anything about it, and I can't give them advice on anything. Like it's tough. How do you support people who kind of are different from yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. But there's correspondences between like a lot of a lot of homophobia in society actually stems from transmisogyny, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So there's correspondences between those
And so much of it
experiences.
is rooted in just plain old vanilla misogyny,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. I mean, transmisogyny comes from misogyny itself,
Yeah.
And also, you know, as I grew up, I was mostly gender non-conforming kid. Um, like for a whole decade, I just identified as in the middle, you know. So there are correspondences between our experiences that can be shared, but it's not. Oh, it's never fully the experience of the other, for sure.
That's the tricky thing, I think, is to find these shared aspects of who we are and then not get caught up in the differences. I don't know. It's this whole thing is really complicated to unpack, and there's only, like we were saying before, there's only so much we can do,
Yeah.
and that's why I tend to focus on, what I do is political stuff, trans related crap I see in the news.
There's a lot of it recently. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about this BBC documentary this
Oh my
week.
god.
I don't really feel like watching it. I keep hearing more and more awful things about it. It's
Yeah.
kind of shame on the BBC. Anyone who's not for some reason in the know about this, the BBC, I don't know if it was BBC 2 or BBC 1, but they have put out this documentary. It was like trans kids do the who knows best or something, about basically these conversion therapy quacks. I think they were actually based out of Canada, weren't they?
No, there was one that I know of. One of those kids that I knew. Yeah, they are. But
But anyways, these guys basically had this idea that they could make kids not trans, and that was their only goal. If a kid turned out to be gay, it was like, well, okay, that's a win. It's not the greatest, but at least they're not a damn dirty trans person. And like, and basically they got disbarred. They weren't telling the truth about a lot of things. Their
yeah.
methods don't work. They're quacks.
Well,
And these people
that-
gave them a platform. They gave them a whole freaking documentary.
Also, they lied to parents to
That's
get their kids on
right.
the show. That's
They told all these parents that they're just making a trans-related documentary, and then they put their kids in it, and then it turns out it's an anti-trans documentary. Not cool, BBC. I maybe have a comic coming out about it tomorrow.
maybe.
No, just we'll see. I don't know. Who knows? But it's absolutely, I don't know. We're here. We are. We're talking about representation. We're wanting to make positive change. And you've got a major outlet like the BBC putting forward something that's like pretty established to just be transphobic crap. It's not even like, oh, we want to show both sides. It's like there's like real stuff and not real stuff, you know. And these guys, like, they're completely discredited. Nobody agrees with them. I mean, like, when are they gonna do a little thing about, I don't know, flat earthers? When are they gonna talk to astrologists and say, we gotta hear astrologers' fair side of the argument? Like, come on, guys.
But also, you know, taking a neutral stance on such a litigious issue is actually siding with the status,
That's right.
with the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And right now the status quo isn't in favor of trans kids, you know, in favor of transitioning. And oh, by the way, I decided to that I actually wanted to play a song.
Oh, good. Yeah, we brought a guitar for this trip. My dad's old guitar that my brother keeps. Sorry, bro, I maybe stole your guitar. So Sophie's gonna maybe play a song for us a bit. It's just the whole trans kid thing is, I don't know, a difficult one for me, especially like I think a lot of us have a lot of it's a wound still, especially like I didn't get to even be a gender non-conforming kid. I lived in this place, like an emotional space, and really a physical place where I grew up, where it just really was not even an option. So I just kind of feel like I missed out on my childhood, the first 20 something years of my life. And it's a
Oh,
raw
alright.
thing. Like, I think a lot of trans people feel that way of like, we want to help the next generation not go through what I went through and not miss out. And you do have to be careful because we don't want to project our feelings too
Yeah,
much onto
I
other
see that a
people.
lot on my comics. As my comics mostly focus on trans kids, I see a lot of people actually, having those very square views on what should be done for trans kids in their best interest, but it's mostly projection
Mhm.
of their own. I've been working a lot with trans kids, and
Mhm.
some parents are so eager to throw their children in the binary. They don't let them explore, and that's something that's been very important for me growing up, to just having a space to just throw out clothes and pronouns, and just identity shape shifting. And
Figure out who you are for yourself.
yeah, and I feel a lot of trans adults from a place of trauma, necessarily, and I totally understand this viewpoint. Um,
The
uh,
problem you run into is so many people say, yeah, we do just have to leave kids alone and let them figure this out for themselves. But what they mean is, but that means they're not allowed to transition at all. Like,
yeah.
it's kind of, there's people who say they're in the name of freedom or whatever, but they're just really, they only care about their thing going
Hmm.
forward. And yeah, really, you have to just let kids figure this stuff out for themselves, give them the space, give them room to breathe. If they want hormones, you should give them to them, I think. Like, if they're going through the wrong puberty, like, cis people don't seem to understand a lot of the time. Going through the wrong puberty is extremely traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even like the physical changes, it sucks. And to live the rest of your life having gone through that, that's like now trauma. People go to therapy to deal with that stuff. Like, it'd be like, yeah, I'll just let the kid go to a concentration camp or something because we need to, what, we don't know if they, whether or not they
Hmm.
want to go to there, you know what I mean? Like, we'll just let a kid go through a really traumatic experience just because I'm not comfortable
Just
with.
because some people expressed regrets that are often stemming from society's transphobia. I see
Yeah.
so many, see so many people bringing up those famous regrets, but most of the time when they pull out articles about people that regretted transitioning, it's mostly because the transphobia they faced, the rejection from their family was just too big, and the support wasn't there. And I don't know, instead of fighting against transition because of regrets, we should fight against transphobia in society and
Right.
sexism.
That is where the majority of problems that people face from being trans is coming from. It's not like, oh yeah, I completely regret, transitioning. It's just
Yeah,
people are
just
awful to me because I transitioned. And like, why isn't that the main issue people want to deal with?
yeah. If people have weird views on that, I guess.
Well, a lot of the people who are awful about this stuff, they think they're completely justified in being awful about it. And they don't see a problem and they're not willing to examine the problem with that. And it's kind of sad. I don't know. How do you bridge this gap with people who just completely
Yeah,
don't see your side of things?
I don't know. My main objective with my work is to reach trans people and to have a discussion with trans people. So I try to, um, just try not to hear this, because often when we talk about trans issues, people see trans people on one side of the spectrum, and see transphobes on the other side, and see a debate between both as a neutral
Mhm.
debate, while actually it's people that are going through this experience, and people that are directly affected by this, against people that are just against our existence,
Mhm.
and that's
And
totally
also people
unfair.
who are not even affected by any of these issues, like they've got no stake in this game,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's
It's
just
just a fun theoretical devil's advocate activity that they do, just because it's stimulating intellectually.
I have a lot of friends who are like they're very smart, they're philosophy majors sometimes, or they're just people who love to talk about ideas, and they sometimes want to like debate this stuff with me, and it's like, honey, I get that like you live in this realm of the mind and you like to discuss issues, but this is like my life here, and like it's kind of insulting that you would even think I want to actually debate my friend about who I am. Like it's just, you're kind of showing, I know you don't, maybe you don't mean to, but you're kind of showing that you don't care about your friends. I don't know, it's a tricky thing because there's, if you're at a philosophy conference and you're discussing ideas like on this purely abstract concept, like is it okay to eat babies or something, like you would never debate that in the real world with real babies or real parents of babies. But we can talk about these ideas in this one setting, and that's great. That's where you play devil's advocate. That's where you are arguing for things that you maybe don't agree with, or you just explore a premise and see where it goes. But then when you're talking with real people in the real world about their real lives, that's maybe not the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
There's plenty of things that I agree with or disagree with on a sort of intellectual plane. But then when it comes to the practical plane, I'm not going to argue about it because whatever. If it's not causing direct problems. Like a big one for me is like religion. Notice I don't talk a whole lot about it because I know a lot of people who are religious and it affects their lives in a positive way and they're not being bad people. So I don't have a problem with them in their lives. But on the sort of philosophical, intellectual realm, I got a lot of issues with doctrines and things. And if somebody was in a space like that with me, we could talk about it. But I'm not going to go to my religious friends and say, hey, you're wrong or something, you know, like practical and the philosophical. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a bit. Do you want to?
I want to talk about the cat cafe.
Yes, I was meaning to ask you about that. You were recently on a real normal radio show instead of a internet radio show, talking in French about the Quebec City. Some cat cafe in Quebec City has a funny idea about menus and trans people.
God, yeah. So it actually became this little mediatic bubble where this famous cafe in Quebec City, where I was for work for a couple of days, had a croque transgender. You know, there's the croque monsieur, who means
like a sandwich, by the way.
That's the name of the sandwich,
yeah,
that you might know. And there's also the croque madame, which translates basically to bite Mister and bite lady, I guess. And so both recipes are a bit different, you know, and the bite transgender was simply a mix of the two. And yeah, I went out and said, this is transphobic. And I was just like, I didn't make a scene at the cafe. I just took a picture and I was like, okay, I think I might not be eating here. And you have to put this in context where I was just there for a kind of vacation. I was drawing there. I wanted to have a calm spot to work. And then you face this kind of microaggression, and it's just constantly you're living with the fear that this kind of stuff is gonna happen, and you gotta be prepared all the time. And I'm just tired of being prepared to be microaggressed,
right?
know?
Yeah, like if you weren't trans and you went out to one of these places, you wouldn't be suddenly confronted right in your face with a thing that's kind of insulting, you know?
Yeah.
And like again, like people who are, say, cis, they don't realize that people who are not fitting into this very comfortable category they're in, they're always being assaulted with these little digs at who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, maybe we should explain why the sandwich is kind of insulting.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, because the cafe was issued in a statement that they did that for visibility, and it was a good intended joke to include trans people, but even if the intention was good, it still comes from transphobia, because it basically says that trans people cannot be misters or ladies.
Yeah, we're not mixes of the two.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's some people who are, there's different sort of genderqueer type, non-binary type identities out there. But like, there is this sort of misconception in society that like we're something in between. or that we can
Mhm.
never be who we really are, say, or like those little things like that just kind of they
Well,
reinforce negative ideas
mhm.
about us.
Yeah, and also what really got to me was the attitude of the cafe. That is really it's really symptomatic of society's like attitude towards allyship. You know, where
Hmm.
if the intent is good, well, there's nothing we can do, even if it actually turns out to be transphobic. And this really gets to me because they just didn't listen to the critique. They just said, well, it was a joke. It was a
Yeah.
joke. We like trans people.
Therefore, we can do no wrong, sort of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
exactly. And that makes me more sad than anything.
Hmm.
I'm like, well, what can we do
And
then?
you feel so silly, like complaining about a sandwich on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
menu.
yeah. I was on the radio talking about this this silly sandwich, and I was just like,
It's not about the sandwich.
yeah, yeah, it's
It's the
bigger.
attitude, and just
Hmm.
again these zillions, this little swarm of mosquitoes, microaggressions coming at you and taking a little bit at a time.
Yeah, and it mostly got big because croque monsieur and croque madame are like very symbolic uh, meals of French culture,
Hmm.
and so people saw exactly where it was coming from, and it was a good discussion opener, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got big. It got
Yeah,
really
it
big.
got
I got a
surprisingly
lot of
big.
hate after that. I also
Everything does.
gave the French version of my comic a lot of visibility, which is always good because it's easy for the English version to get around. Even often, I see like French speaking organization or associations that cater to French speaking populations that actually share my comics in English instead of French. I'm like,
Oh, that's
well,
right.
did you know there was a French version? And often they're like, oh yeah, we just wanted to reach more people. And I'm like, well, that's
Mhm.
how you kill a language,
Right.
basically.
I remember you were talking about one time there will be, say, in France, people who will take your English comic and then translate it into France
Oh
French
my
instead
god.
of share the Quebec French.
That happened. Yep. Yeah, when you're a minority language, well, French is spoken by how many people? Maybe 70 million in Europe
Well, it's
and
all over
Quebec.
the
There's
world.
there's a lot of French being spoken in Africa, and so it's probably a lot more than that. But in western in the Western world, it's probably around 80 millions or something. And so yeah, that's still a big language, but on the internet, it's definitely a minority language, and it's a lot more difficult to have access to regional differences. And yeah, my comic is happening in Montreal, so the English that we see in it would be English that's spoken in Montreal, and that's the same for the French version. So I wouldn't want my characters to speak a French that we hear in France instead of Montreal's French. So that's a big thing. That often what I found is that in English, if people encounter a word they don't know, the majority's attitude towards that word will be, you know, coming from this huge empire, it was the British Empire. People are just like, oh well, I guess it's a word somewhere in the world. While in French, where we're so attached to the purity of our language, as soon as there's a word that seems unfamiliar, people will question it a lot more than in English, from what I
Hmm.
can see on both my comics, and it's very interesting because in the comic. Like in the codes that we use in comics, it's mostly familiar language that we're gonna use. It's in a work of literature for uh, and so yeah, it's really interesting to see the difference in the way people will perceive words they don't know in a language from another.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always found French very funny in that they've got their academy of what is French and what isn't
Yeah,
French.
bunch of old cis white men carrying swords around Paris.
They carry swords.
They carry swords.
Oh my god! Can I join?
They're pretty funny. They get their sword as soon as they get in the academy. There was this Asian Quebecer author that got in the academy.
Oh.
He was one of the first member with Aimé Césaire. Césaire, I think, the poet from Haiti also, I think, got there. That was a pretty big event because most of them are just very old white men.
So we actually have some questions from the audience. They're mostly just fun. There's some. I mean, so I did the sort of cover art for this interview is Mario Brothers, but there's a very serious question here. I don't know how much of a Nintendo fan you were growing up, but do you prefer Mario Brothers 3 or Sonic 3?
Oh, Mario Brothers 3.
Really?
I don't think we never owned any Sonic game actually.
Really? See, I was the
we only had
opposite.
Nintendo. My mom was a big Nintendo fan, so
Really?
we only got Nintendos. Yeah.
We only had Sega, so my answer is Sonic 3.
Actually, I have like very very deep issues with Super Mario Brothers 3 because a month before giving us, we got our first Nintendo entertainment system for Christmas, and my mom actually, as soon as we would go to bed a month before Christmas, she would play Mario 3 each night, and so as soon as we got the gift, she could already beat the game like that.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah. And so everybody was a bit like concerned, and like it was really hard to play that game after that.
That's one way to impress your kids, I suppose, or mess with their perceptions of their abilities. For me, it was Sonic 3 all the way, but you have to combine it with Sonic and Knuckles.
Oh,
because then it adds so much more to the game. That game, actually, originally I think they were supposed to be one game, but they couldn't do it, so they separated them, which was a very smart business move, really. But
that Sonic was actually the first. I was reading through the comics that were out in mid-90s.
Those are my first comics. My first comic I ever got was Sonic and Knuckles Super Special.
I was really into Donald Duck comics and Carl Barks and Don Rosa's comics, but the first American comics that I got, like more superhero likes, were Sonic comics.
And they were put out by Archie, so they had this sort of softness to them.
Mm-hmm.
That
well, I think it's mostly that when you want comics in French, you necessarily need to go through Europe.
Oh yeah.
Because they don't publish, this format of comics in French that English-speaking people get in North America, and so Sonic wasn't translated, and so I just really loved the characters, and even though I couldn't read English back then, I just loved those comics, and so they were the first actual North American comics that I got.
They were a good way to start off. And you know what? I was too uptight when I was, like, say, in my early 20s. When going back and looking at them, I was like, ugh, that's for babies. But now I can appreciate them, and they're fun. I like them. I still have all of mine, pretty much. Mostly, they're all just, fun questions we've got here. There's one asking about the cat in your gender if it coloring book. If it has a gender, and I guess we can elaborate that into a larger question. Do you think about that, about side characters? Do you think about backstories? If you put in a little person, like say that pirate in that one strip, is that
the
person
Pogo captain?
Yeah. Do you think about these things? Do you give, say, assign backstories or genders to side characters?
Not really, no. Actually. Usually, people in the backgrounds of my comics were just drawn on the spot while I was drawing it.
It's tough. I think a lot of people don't realize, when you're making a webcomic, it's go.
Yeah, especially on a tight schedule, right. I've been. I was just making these up. Is there a song you want me to play? I've been playing.
I don't know. You got a whole
music.
book of songs here.
Yeah, but
I
I've
don't,
been playing them. Is there one that you like?
I don't remember, honestly. They all blur together. Especially all the ones in French. I don't even know the names, right?
I'll try one in English that I played. Is there any that?
I don't. What ones did you play? A lot of songs, honestly.
Uh,
We've just been hanging out all week in a hotel room.
don't tell them that.
Well, what? We're working. We're doing stuff. Don't worry. But no, one way you unwind is by playing music.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I brought the guitar for you because it would have been really hard for you to bring one here on the airplane.
I don't want to play another song in French. That's what I did the other time.
Oh, well, I don't know. Play whatever you're most comfortable with.
Well,
There's a Hakuna Matata there.
I know people would love it, but it's not really great on the guitar actually. It's just like
Yeah, I guess it kind of needs those steel drums
I
or whatever.
played this song that you seem to have liked.
Oh yeah, let's go for that.
Okay.
See if you all recognize this one.
I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. Life is plastic. It's fantastic. You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. Imagination, life is your creation. I'm a blonde bimbo girl in a fantasy world. Dress me up, make it tight. I'm your dolly. You're my doll, rock and roll. Feel the glamour and pink. Kiss me here, touch me there, and keep banking. You can touch, you can play. If you say I'm always yours. I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. Life is plastic. It's fantastic. You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. Imagination, life is your creation. Come on, Barbie, let's go party. Yeah. Come on, Barbie, let's go party. Ooh, ooh. Make me walk, make me talk, do whatever you please. I can act like a star, I can beg on my knees. Come jump in, bimbo friend, let us do it again. Hit the town, fool around, let's go party. You can touch, you can play. If you say I'm always yours. Come on, Barbie, let's go party. Yeah. Come on, Barbie, let's go party. Ooh. Come on, Barbie, let's go party. Yeah. Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
Lovely, my dear.
Thank you.
That's what I've been getting to have all.
Silly pop song remixed in a romantic ballad.
Oh, it's very sensual. Well, kids, we're getting close to an hour, and we're gonna probably cut this because we're probably supposed to go do a bunch of work and stuff now.
Yeah, work.
By work, we mean
yes.
drawing cartoons. But it's been a pleasure, honey. We're gonna do more shows. Back on the regular schedule every Sunday now. Going out live mostly.
Do you know who's gonna be next week?
Next week's gonna be the artist of Serpentennial Comics, which is you've been sort of talking about them a bit. They're a new webcomic. I don't know how long they've been around exactly, but talking about a lot of like poly issues, a little bit of trans stuff. I really like his art, and he loves JoJo, Steven Universe. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. So, yeah, I always feel a little bit self-conscious plugging my own stuff on this show because really when I have a guest on, it's all about them. The truth is, I don't get paid specifically to do this show. I do it because I like it, and it's actually a lot of work.
Go see our Patreon.
Yeah, I would. I don't know. I'm trying to. We didn't even talk about it, but we're going to Germany for an artist retreat thing.
Oh yeah.
And I make money doing freelance art, but I'm supposed to be working on a graphic novel, so I'm kind of a little concerned about buying food.
I've been paying for food for the whole week.
Not all of it. I bought burritos. But the point is, if you like this podcast and would like to see more or hear more and see more art that I produce for it, because I really do enjoy doing that stuff, maybe consider supporting the podcast and my webcomics, and you will not be disappointed. Everybody who supports me on Patreon gets
a dinosaur.
You
I
get
got
it
one.
right off the bat. You get a dinosaur. That's guaranteed. People who support me beyond that, there's other perks, and I do Patreon specific comics, and it's going to a good cause. I swear, seriously. But thank you so much for listening. This will be posted to stream. I will put it up. I'm looking for new ways to stream this thing because right now I just put it on YouTube because it's easy. It's difficult to do things like, say, SoundCloud, because SoundCloud actually makes you pay money. Another reason maybe to support the podcast. But there will be more coming, I swear. I'll never stop doing it because I love doing it. And it really means a lot to me that you listened this week. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.